and welcome back to my channel. Or just welcome if you are new here. My name is Rusty. I don't know what I was doing there, I just had a moment. Welcome to day 7 of my first Zombie Fest. I really enjoyed doing this, and I'm going to enjoy doing a lot more. So, yeah. We are going to finish up this one with 2010 The Crazies, or better known as The Crazies. So this is the 2010 remake of the 1973 George A. Romero film. The biggest difference between these two is that the original is sort of like a whole lot more from the perspective of the military and about the military and their perspective, whereas this one is a lot more about the townspeople, and that's the biggest difference that I saw in it. It's also the biggest difference that the director talks about in the screenplay, or in the special features. So yeah. The Crazies was released in 2010, directed by Breck Eisner, written by Scott Kosar, Wright, and of course George A. Romero from the original. Stars Radha Mitchell, Timothy Olyphant, and Joe Anderson. And yeah, that's the way I like it. So, The Crazies starts with we see a town at night on fire, and then all of a sudden, you know, like the streets, the buildings are on fire and everything. We're walking down the street, and we see a little message that says 2 days earlier, and we are introduced to Ogden Marsh, Iowa. We are introduced to Dr. Judy and Sheriff David and Officer Russell, his deputy. Russell, yeah, cool. His name is Russell. So, he was cute too. And so was David. It was definitely a cop sandwich there in the making or something like that. But anyway, I'm getting off track. Rory comes into a baseball game, and Rory is this elderly guy. I don't know, older guy. Can't really tell how old he was. He lived about 65 or something 70. But he comes in to the baseball field while they're having the small town baseball game, and he just stands there, and everybody notices he's got a shotgun, and David runs out there and is like, put the gun down, you're drunk, whatever, and the guy just starts to shoot him. He's got a nosebleed, and the guy just starts to shoot him, and David has to kill him. So there's that. So that really upsets him, and they come, you know, racing over there, like Russell and Dr. Judy and all. They come to take him, and we all of a sudden see like a spy plane view, you know, like Google Earth type thing. We see this spy plane view, and overhead we see 2 jets flying overhead. And yes, I noticed that. You know, I'm like, uh-oh. So we see the aftermath. We see the wife and the son are very upset at the morgue. And they even she even does the Sheriff Brody thing from Jaws, where she slaps the sheriff. I guess like a nod to Jaws there. So, you know, they tell him though that the man had not drank in 2 years, that he was not drunk. And I think David is just sort of like, yeah, okay, whatever. So that was kind of tense. Then while he's in his office, the medical examiner calls and tells him that they were right. There was no drugs in his system, and there was no alcohol in his system. So, you know, he's upset. He goes back to the baseball field probably to feel sorry for himself and the situation, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. And he sees the principal just sort of standing there or sitting there on the bench, and he's like this daze look on his face. So he snaps out of it, and then we see Judy is in her office, and she's seeing a guy named Bill because the wife and son are saying that he's been acting weird. And he too is just like sitting in a daze. She has to snap him out of it, trying to answer questions. And then that night we see him. She wakes up, Deidre, his wife, wakes up, can't find him. She thinks he's out in the barn. She goes out there, and the big, it's like a corn or cotton harvester, is running. She turns it off, hears noise back at the house, runs back up there, and he's after them, like with a knife and stuff. So she gets her son and locks him. They get in. They don't lock him. They climb into a closet to hide from him. He finds them in there, locks them in there, goes downstairs, sets the house on fire, burns them alive, and then the next day, or when the sheriff and all them get out there, he's mowing the grass like there ain't nothing wrong. Is the way he was found. And so yeah, they're definitely starting to think that something is going on. So we then see 3 hunters, typical Duck Dynasty looking redneck hunters out in the woods, and they run across a parachute hanging in a tree and a dead body in the water. The sheriff comes out there and they go looking for the plane. They're like, well, if you parachuted out of a plane, where's the plane? So they're checking out the place, and they do end up finding the plane. And that's when David starts to suspect, why would a plane crash into the swamp? Why would a plane crash? And then no one say anything about it. No news reports. So he starts getting very suspicious. He ends up like going to the mayor and is like, you've got to cut off the water supply to this town because something's going on. So Bill, they've gotten Bill, the guy that burned his family up. They've got him back at the jail cell, and he ends up turning, and they get to see like the final stage of this disease, and that's ugly, and an ugly scene as well. Now, he also notices that the cell phones don't work, the internet doesn't work, the phones don't work, and he sees a few people acting strange in town, but otherwise it's just dead. And that's when he's like, we're in real trouble. Something really is going on around here. So he also notices like a Men in Black SUV that takes off when it sees him. So he goes back home to Judy, because they're together. He goes back home to Judy and tries to convince her to leave town. She says, no, I'm not going to, as you would expect. And then she hears something outside, and they go outside, and they are accosted and taken by soldiers. Like the whole town has now been like completely soldierized, militarized. So they've turned the high school into a quarantine camp, like a FEMA camp, and they're testing their temperature. The ones that have a fever, they're keeping. The ones that they're not, they're supposedly going to let go. So, David and Judy get separated because she's got a temperature, but then she's pregnant and she's had a temperature all week, so I don't know anything about that, but obviously it can cause a temperature. I think it can cause a lot of shit in your body. But, so they take Judy as being a possible positive and have her tied down in a sick room with other people that they suspect could be positive. Not that they are, but that they could be. And Dave is taken into an exit area where he is like, they're forced onto like cattle cars, and they're taken out to this bus stop way out of town where they are going to be evac'd. But he doesn't sit around for that. Instead, he is going to go back to town to get his wife, of course. So he goes back to town. Whereas this is happening, too many of the townsfolk have turned, number one, and the others are just pissed off. So they've revolted, and between the attack from the infected and the revolted, they lose that camp and the soldiers evac, and Judy is stuck in there with the sick ward, like I said, and her and Becca aren't really sick. And we see Principal Ben coming around with that pitchfork. And those are some ugly kills as he walks through there killing people. He almost kills Becca, but Judy screams, and that brings his attention to her. He goes over to kill her, but David takes him out, and him and Joe are together. So the four of them, Becca, Judy, Joe, and David, they all take off through, back to town because they need to find an automobile. Well, all of the automobiles have been booted. They've had the jack boots put on them. And so they can't get one. Now, they do think that they find one, and it turns out to be those three hunters. They were probably, in my opinion, they were probably one of the first ones to turn right, because they're the ones who found that dead body in the swamp. But they have now become this little psycho trio, and they're just like killing anybody that they can find. So the four of them decide that they can get back to his house, to Judy and David's house. If they can get there, he's got the old cruiser up on blocks that the soldiers wouldn't have known about. So they are going to try to make it back home, and while they're on their way, they get close enough to Becca's boyfriend's house for her to take a detour to get Scotty. That was a pretty rancid scene in that they did they did find Scotty. Then all of a sudden soldiers are everywhere. They drag out Scotty's mom to test her, and Scotty can't handle it. He runs out. They blow his ass away. Then they blow her ass away. Then they set them both on fire. Now, so the four of them are in the barn, and that's when he tells the Becca and Judy to go to the back. They capture one of the soldiers and interrogate him, and he tells them that they're just following orders and that he's going to die now that they took his mask off. And they said, no, you're not. But then again, who knows? So they agree to let him go if he lets them go. If he says the barn is clear, they won't kill him. So he agrees. So that's how they get out of that situation. Now they do manage to make it back to Dave's house, and you have these emotional moments, but it turns out that Rory's wife and son, they are there. So there's a nice scare scene where Judy goes into their nursery that they have made for the upcoming baby, and she's standing behind her. So that's a good scare scene. Then David comes in. She's tied up in a chair, and we have this nice fight between David and her, and David and the wife and son of Rory. Thankfully, Russell sees them from outside, takes care of the kid. He takes care of the mom. That's pretty good. It's a pretty good scene. So they end up getting the car, they get it fixed, and they drive away. Now, it's about this time that I started going, what's up with Russell? He's acting a little sketchy, you know. So I started suspecting that Russell is infected. Because they found out that, you know, it's not like instantly. It has some kind of incubation time. They just don't know how much. So they're driving on, and they end up... I got lost. They end up being spotted by a helicopter, because you can imagine the military is like, no-go zone, like no one is getting out of this town. So they never said anything about animals, though. But that's a side note, isn't it? We have to stick to the actual information that we've been given. So they're spotted by a helicopter, and they hide in this car wash, which is a pretty cool scene, because it turns out they're not alone in that car wash, and a bunch of little Zeds turn it on, attack them, and that's where we get this cool kill scene where Becca gets killed. And that was a fucked up scene. So now we're down to 3. It's always needling down to the final boy or girl, right? Or the final couple or something like that. So Russell continues to get more aggressive, but see, they had all jumped out of the car when Becca got killed, because of the way she got killed. One of the Zeds had like wrapped a rope around her, or a hose around her, that was still attached up there. So as the car went away, she was jerked out, and it hung her and killed her. Probably snapped her neck. But that's okay, because the helicopter, it blew up the car. So yeah, they're back on foot again. Now that's when we really start to see that there is no longer any doubt that Russell has got this disease. So he takes the gun and makes Dave and Judy walk in front of him, and both of them are like, he's got it, you know. So David ends up confronting him and is like, don't you realize that something is wrong with you? Things aren't going right? Well, okay. But they continue to go as he tries to convince him of that. And a military car comes, and they end up wrecking it, like with a strip. David and Judy, and that's how they really knew he was fucked. Because David and Judy, they wanted to like kill the guy, do whatever, but we need to get this automobile. But Joe, he grabs a spike strip. That thing tumbles like 15 times. The car is destroyed, but at least David and Judy can talk to him. You know, what the hell is going on here? What did you people do? That's when we learn the backstory. And that is that, yes, that plane had a biological weapon in it, a germ warfare weapon called Trixie. So, you've been infected by Trixie. In the Stand, it was Captain Tripp. So, you know, they got to always give these things a name. But, so yeah, this bioweapon was called Trixie. And it was being taken to Louisiana to be incinerated. So, at least that's what they claim, right? So, they couldn't get any more information out of that, though, because Joe fucking blows his brains out. And that's when they were really like, okay, you know, you are gone over the edge. So, Russ now knows. He's finally able to convince him. And even Russ himself says that I'm not right, am I? And he's like, no, you're not. You're gone. You know you are. So, Their next plan is they want to get to that exit area, the truck stop. So they can't get out of town though, right? Because all the ways into town are going to be blocked off. So Joe decides to sacrifice himself. And it was kind of a sad scene, like right there where he admitted that he was infected. Even though he had just caused a bunch of crap, it's like he was able to pull himself back together long enough. And he was very sad. And the realization washed over him. And the way that he asked them kind of made me sad, because he asked them, can I still walk with you guys for a little bit? And that was really sad, because you knew he had now accepted it and was having to deal with the fact that he was going to die and become one of these things. So when they get to the roadblock, he talks Dave and Judy into let me go and distract them so y'all can sneak around them and get out. So that's what happens. And that's a pretty cool scene where he sacrifices himself for them. And Dave and Judy then make it to that truck stop where he goes in to try to find out, because it's completely empty. He goes in to try to find out if there's anything that can help, like an automobile. And she stays outside, and then we learn the truth, because she finds the truth. And that is that all of those townsfolk that they had cleared at the camp to be taken out of town were not. They were piled up there at that place and executed and burned. So, yeah, the military. Okay? The military complex will get us all in the end. So, they decide, after a little bit of debate, that they will still continue to try to run. And he had seen a truck inside, a semi. So they're going to get it, only it's not going to be that simple, because it can't be that simple. Because those 3 asshole hunters who have popped up in these 3 different sections of the movie, this is where they're at. And they're still wanting to party. So we have a lot of really nice scares and chase of David and Judy trying to work against these 3 hunters. And they, of course, managed to defeat them in the nice little boss fight act. And that's when Dave had found one of the military radios. And they were talking about stuff was in place and the countdown had begun. So they jumped in that truck and they hauled ass down the road. And as it counted down, it finally went off, and they fucking nuked that town. Which would clear a 5-mile radius, probably. So that was a really good explosion. The shockwave, they weren't far enough away to avoid the shockwave. It tore that rig up pretty bad, left it on the side of the road. They got out, and they are walking on to Cedar Rapids. So obviously this was close to there. So they are walking across this field with the Cedar Rapids skyline in the distance, and it looks like everything's going to be okay. Until, of course, you see the spy plane zoomed right in on them, and then it zooms back out, and it says, Cedar Rapids, population, whatever, quarantine protocol, initiate quarantine protocol, and then the movie goes off. And you're like, well, that's just shit, because neither one of them have it. I mean, couldn't they just swoop down and grab them too, and wait a few days? and make sure, because they didn't have it. So what, they're going to destroy Cedar Rapids now? Is that what you're saying? When will it end? Well, the movie ended. They should have did a sequel. Nothing ever gets a sequel that I wanted to get a sequel. Shit that I don't want to get a sequel. Like, please, God, don't give me another. I mean, like, who the fuck wanted Jason Goes to Hell? I wanted a sequel to The Crazies. But that's The Crazies 2010. The remake of the George A. Romero original. And that finishes up. I really like this movie. I love the Zeds in this movie too. Special features on this Blu-ray was really cool. It talked about how they came up with this particular variety of Zed. All the different diseases that they used to, come up with the physical. Because in this movie, these Zeds, all of their physicality stuff is based on real diseases, really bad, ugly diseases. Because they wanted it to be realistic. Because if you create a superbug, you're going to create it off the back of another superbug. So you're going to so Trixie, I guess, was like an amalgamation of these really horrible diseases, and it got loose, obviously. Would the military really fly a biohazard? I should look that up. I don't think the military... Well, I guess they could. I guess they do. I wouldn't. You shouldn't fly. Well, didn't you just see that train derailment? Okay, yeah, I know that all means of transportation are dangerous. But I still say that auto transportation of something extremely dangerous, like a biohazard, a bioweapon, would be the safest. Because, you could have these trucks, right? And these trucks could have all of these vehicles escorting them. Can't really do that. I mean, if a fucking plane crashes, you're fucked. Right? And the same with a train. It too can run into a problem. So I still think that they shouldn't have been transporting Trixie in a plane. Because, well, look what happened. This answers that question. Whereas had it been in an auto, they can have an escort. And it clears the road. Make sure nobody comes near it. Make sure no drunk asshole hits us at the intersection. So I think it would be safest. What do you think? I think it would be safest to move a biohazard in an automobile of some type, rather than a plane. The plane seems the stupidest way, the most dangerous way. Because if that sucker goes down, it's going to spread all over the place. What if it comes apart in the air? Then it's going to be in the atmosphere. No. If you're in the military, don't transport biohazards in the plane. So, love you, miss you, bye. And always remember, and never forget, you are a very, very, very special person, even if you are not infected by Trixie. And I will see you in whatever I do next. Well, I know what's next is my January update at the beginning of March. So I'm like, because all of February is sitting right there. January is still sitting right there. So I need to do my January update so that I can move January out the way, put February there, and get ready for March. Because eBay and Walmart online and everywhere else I buy film movies from is waiting for me to start bringing in what I want from March. Which, of course, I already have a wish list full of shit. So, I will see you then. Love you, miss you. Bye-bye. My update will be next, and then I think I'm going to... Well, I picked out 7. I'm going to do a slasher fest. So, I'm going to pick out. I'm going to do 7 slashers that I picked out to spotlight and talk about, that I just felt like talking about. Well, it's because I want to watch them again. So I picked 7 that I wanted to watch again, and that will be my slasher fest, my first slasher fest. Love you, miss you. Bye-bye. See you in the next one.